Show me the crypto. Show me the crypto. Show me the crypto.
In a world on the brink of disruption, two men will bring you clarity by interviewing some of the most intelligent and influential names in the blockchain world. Welcome to Show Me the Crypto with your hosts, Wade Patterson and Ulf Lonergan.
Well, hi there, and welcome to Show Me the Crypto. My name is Wade Patterson.
And I'm Ulf Lonergan.
We're a couple of friends from Canada who love learning about cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology, and we're happy you're along for the ride. Whether you're a crypto virgin or you know your way around the block, we hope our interviews with some of the most intelligent and influential people in the blockchain space help deliver you with value. And on this episode, we're joined by Janice Taylor, founder and CEO of EQ Exchange, which aims to put power back into artists' hands through NFTs and offers unique experiences and gifts for fans and collectors. Janice is a three-time tech founder who's passionate about empowering creators and whose focus lies in the middle of the Venn diagram where tech, finance, and wellness intersect. Janice, welcome to Show Me the Crypto.
Good. Thank you so much. It's awesome to be here.
We're excited to have you on, and I wanted to start, we're going to dive into all things EQ Exchange, but since it is a platform that really empowers artists and musicians, I thought I'd start with a music question, and simply, how did music impact you growing up, and as a fan, what types or genres of music do you gravitate toward?
You know, I think it's so interesting you say this because very few people ask me that question. So thank you. Music is in the background of all of our lives. If we think about it, there isn't a memory that you don't have that you don't think correlate to a song. Childbirth, we put music on to relax. Weddings, sadly, even funerals, right? We have like our first dance at high school. We have all these moments where like music is like the soundtrack in the back of our lives. We watch movies, it's the music. But for me, oddly enough, it's really tied and correlates into why I decided to make EQ. My mom, I'm from Saskatchewan. I grew up with just my mom. I was 6 years old when my dad left. And we had no money and she had no job, but she played the piano and she was a really good piano teacher. So my mom went door to door asking the neighborhood if anybody wanted a piano lesson. And that's how we survived.
Wow.
So I often say the piano saved us, but it truly is a thing. And my mom never spent much more, even to this day. She's 78. She still teaches piano. And I said, what kept her alive during all those years in the 80s with inflation and as a single mom raising 3 kids on a piano teacher's salary, which was appalling, like $8 a lesson, I think she charged at the time. And she drove to all the houses to teach piano, but she never spent more than, a foot from a piano during the last 50 years. And so I think it saved us in so many ways. And then fast forward, I didn't see my dad for decades. And I saw him last summer. And the first thing he asked me was, what was my favorite tape as a kid? And I hadn't seen him for 30 years, really over a half dozen times over those years. But he remembered the fact that I used to love his cassette tapes. And so when he passed away, I got a box full of his cassette tapes. Basically, his last sort of earthly possessions in many ways was a cassette tape. And so for me, music is very personal, but I think it's connected to finance and it's connected to survival. So, this just felt fitting to make this company.
And this EQ is your third tech startup now.
Yeah.
So can you tell
Great.
us a little bit about your background as a tech founder and how did you discover blockchain technology and eventually, get to where we are with EQ?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I first decided to make a tech company, again, I mentioned I was from Saskatchewan, but I was really concerned about digital privacy. At the time in 2009, everyone's like, let's go to Facebook and meet everyone from high school again. And I was like, no, didn't we do that already? I thought we had already kind of completed that. But what I was more concerned about was kids getting online. And I was concerned that there wasn't any safety rails. And I had 2 little girls at the time in 2009, and I was concerned about that. So I literally Googled how to make a tech company, and all these blogs came up. And I thought, well, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to write Oprah. and tell her I'm going to quit my job and make a tech company, which is a true story. And I had a call from the Oprah show 3 days later. And,
Wow.
and that's literally how I started my first tech company. And I went then to Silicon Valley, and it was amazing. There was all these innovations. There was very few women, and there was very few people of color when I went to Silicon Valley and lived there. And during that time, a happenstance conversation led me to come back to Canada. I had met the founder of Club Penguin. And Club Penguin, which was purchased by Disney, was really the first virtual world in many cases that were successful. And that was a very successful metaverse before there was a metaverse.
Right.
So I was already in my first startup getting connected into digital goods, really looking at data and privacy and being passionate. Not really a fan of centralized data platforms, not really a fan of behavior conditioning that I saw because my roots in education was psychology. And that really sort of was what I would say the beginning underpinnings of coming to Web3, because, I was already passionate about financial inclusion, having watched my mother. I was already passionate about, again, data not being owned by one conglomerate. I was already decentralized in my brain. And grew up in Saskatchewan, which is the birthplace of co-ops and co-op banks. And so DAOs for me was a very easy concept to understand because some of the most successful co-ops are here in Canada. Mm-hmm. So, I just all of it was sort of seeds that I went, okay. So after 10 years with my first company, my second company was drawing the connection between emotional wellness and financial wellness. And so I worked inside of a debt consolidation company to really draw the connection again to why do people end up bankrupt and what's going on in our financial systems that can sort of lead to that. So that was very, very quick. It was an awesome experience. Licensed basically my modality, which was a healing modality. And then I thought I was good. I'm like, okay, I'm good. And then I met an amazing artist and she asked me to read her contract. And she was one of the most prolific women. She was beautiful. She was talented. She was both a musician and an actress. And when I read her contract, I could see how this system was really predatory. And then all of a sudden, every light bulb went off in my head. And at the time, everyone was talking about decentralization and different financial tools in Web3 and crypto. And I was like, wow, isn't this a heaven sent? And so I basically felt that this whole collision of all these pieces came together.
How did that connection happen with that particular artist that you had a relationship that they would send that to you to review their contract? It's really, I've had this dual life for the last 15 years. So by day, I'm this closet CEO. I'm a CEO. I run tech companies. I build companies. I've been in real estate investing. And I've always had by night a healing practice. I've always helped people heal. And so I've had this really sort of weird dual existence, and she knew about that. Right. So she knew that I ran companies and was aware and could read contracts, and I was helping her heal. So there was a trusted bond that was formed, and it just didn't fit right with her. It just didn't sit well. And so she brought it up to me. And I said to her, I said, well, I can read the contract and I can tell you right now your exit strategy. So I said, for me, we're wired to okay, this contract is all well and good right now, but when shit goes sideways, what are we going to do with it? So yeah. I always look for the pages of termination clauses. How do you get out? What are you giving up in order to be in these contracts? And so that's sort of a CEO. Most CEOs are wired that way. And I noticed that she had no exit. And she had no exit. She was bought. And she didn't know she was bought. She didn't know that that was in the contract. Unless you were really versed in it, you wouldn't know. And you were bought for bottom dollar price. So it'd be like someone buying your company today that, tomorrow becomes, Apple. And there was no valuation. And so there was no scaling to the growth of this. And there was no renewals of contract. It was just the most blanketed contract I'd ever seen. And so I said, well, this is a problem.
And so let's get into EQ then. What is EQ for those who don't know? Can you sort of give the explainer on EQ, the platform?
Yeah. So EQ, by looking at it right now today, you would say it's a music NFT marketplace. That's kind of the easiest description of it. And I think a lot of us in the last 6 months came out of the gates, Royal, Minsons, Sound XYZ, there was a lot that all sort of came out of the gates with marketplaces. You have a piece of music, let's make it an NFT, let's make a marketplace. Because I've been in this industry so long, I never saw the marketplace as a final resting spot. I saw it as an A/B testing. Like early on in technology, they say you have to ship it. You have to ship your product, ship it fast, get it out there, get feedback. I'm the only woman-led music NFT platform. So I think women build companies differently. So I right away was like, okay, let's launch this and see. So we launched the marketplace. We launched with Ashanti, which was amazing. Again, she is the prolific artist, but also I would say the poster child for getting your music back and re-recording your music after a long contract that has kept you in that state of indentured servitude. So we launched with her and we got so much feedback. And there was like 3 prevailing things that we learned when we first launched the marketplace was collectors don't know why they're here yet. They're like, why am I here? And why should I buy a music NFT? Just because I'm a fan of your music, the connection between that and the why isn't there. Artists still need capital. So that's the other biggest thing is that, just because you launched a music NFT doesn't mean it's going to sell out, but no one wants to talk about that. The artist is still in the same situation of needing capital, and community and building a community and building an audience still exists in Web3. It doesn't matter that, you have this over here. It doesn't magically appear. And so because of the 3 C's, we call it, we really started to look at how we could build in this back-end infrastructure. So could we use smart contract technology to essentially create greater capital opportunities by collateralizing the assets? And so really EQ is becoming, and since we're Canadian, I can say this, like the Shopify of the music NFT world. Like, how do you build a really solid NFT and a solid portfolio? Just like how do you build a really good e-commerce website? There is the same pieces that need to go into that puzzle. So we are moving into the back-end infrastructure to support the development of the artist's career.
It's super relatable, the comment about as a collector, they don't really know why. We've had a number of guests over this past summer talking about Web3 music and that type of thing. And even having it explained time and time again, you're still like, you kind of get there of why you might want to collect and that type of thing. But I guess in terms of that initial launch and getting the marketplace up, can you talk a little bit about what incentives were there for fans of the music? Because it went beyond just physical or beyond a digital NFT. There were certain, I guess, elements of utility. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I've really tried to sort of school most of the artists and sort of educate that you should have a financial component and you should have a utility component. Like collectibles are nice, but most fans actually aren't really collectibles. Like they're not going to go buy everything you've ever put out. They're not going to buy every t-shirt. So, sometimes you have to humble an artist because they think, well, if I drop a t-shirt and a hat with my face on it, everyone's going to buy it. Not always. Right. And so we sort of have to humble some of that. But, the utility component of it, I think, is like when we've launched, it's been like backstage passes, some of the sort of standard utilities. The thing that where we're headed and why we're building this infrastructure is I believe that the music NFT space is monopoly. And you need to treat the music NFT space and really the whole NFT space like monopoly. Now, the reason why most founders and most companies try to shy away from the economic side of it is because the SEC is going to come down and say that these are securities. So nobody really wants to talk about them from a financial utility. And so the way that I see what artists need to do is before they even launch an NFT is to say, okay, well, here's my catalog. Here's my future catalog. And your catalog of music is not only just the music, it's the tours, it's the commerce, it's the branding, it's the plethora of the whole experience. And if you think about NFTs as a utility, they're basically pieces of that puzzle if we were to think about this as a whole monopoly board. So when I say to an artist, let's take Beyonce. If Beyonce became a monopoly board, she'd have Park Place, but she's going to have Charles Street. She's not going to have not everything is Park Place, right, but not everything is Charles Street. But when you move around a board, you want to collect those pieces. And if you collect those pieces, then you actually have something that may not have value, a backstage pass for a concert in Toledo, suddenly can all of a sudden have value because it's built into a portfolio theory. And I think that what we're missing is the sort of in-depth understanding of building financial wealth with Web3. Everything is one-hit wonders. So like, oh, buy this in one NFT and it's going to go to the moon. Probably not. So like, how do we teach artists and also collectors to think about this more from a portfolio theory? And if you think about it from there, it's no different than stocks, right? You've got penny stocks and you've got, blue chip. And so NFTs, when played in that way, can really be enormously valuable, but most of the world is not playing the game that way.
So how does it work for, let's say you're an artist and you want to go, utilize EQ and you want to create NFTs to market yourselves and just to service your fans? What's the process look like? And, what are some of those initial sort of NFTs that an artist might create?
So, a lot of our artists share a reward in the royalties. So they share in a reward there. So they offer a piece of their royalties and we call it a reward, like a Costco card. So essentially you're buying a membership, you receive a rebate. There's that component of it. So when an artist comes to us right now, about 85% of it is automated. But in the beginning, we met with every artist to walk them through the minting process, right down to their cover art, to the song they pick. We really believe that one song is ultimately an NFT. And so what can you build around that collateral? So they have one song, they add their cover art, and then we decide, and really that's been part of the art form, is figuring out what is the tokenomics with this. Is it better to have 25 tokens that sell for $20 or 200 tokens that sell for $100 or $1, right? So how do you really create the art and the science? I don't think we're there yet, really in the full depth of that understanding. And then they attach a utility, backstage passes. In Ashanti's case, she offered a red carpet walk with her. So she was really generous with her NFTs. And so basically you buy that, and we do fractional ownership. So we do fractional NFTs. So 25 people will own in the one asset, and they will own a piece of it. So fractional to a percentage. We also built on the CELO blockchain. So that's also been part of the education. The next tranche of product that comes out of EQ will automate the entire process from the profile setup to create an NFT. That essentially we walk you through step by step on how to build this NFT with information and education. So at every step, it's like, watch this explainer, then you decide. Watch this explainer, then you decide. And right down to right now, we're built on CELO, but we do believe in a multi-chain strategy, which ultimately we want artists to choose the chain. So because some chains will be better than others at different points in time. So you may want to launch on Matic and you may want on Polygon and you may want to launch the next day on Ethereum, but maybe you want to throw in a CELO. So, and again, thinking about this in a bundled portfolio theory, which I think, again, people say, well, the chains don't matter. Yeah, they do. Because the chains have value. They just don't want you to know they have value, but they have value. So depending on where you mint that, it can matter. And so, those are some of the pieces of the puzzle that we felt were missing, is to really fully automate that process. Once they've gone through that whole process, then it still goes into what we call underwriting. So we still approve the final asset. So we just make sure, like, do the tokenomics make sense based on the data we have of the artist? And we go through that whole process of ensuring that. The final thing that we did that's very different, I believe Sound XYZ does it as well, is we offer multiple splits on the contract, which is also has to be for music. Initially, when NFTs were built, they were built for one artist, one NFT, right? Like one person drew this painting. Not 10 people, one person. Right. But in music, we know that's not the case. You have multiple people that are part of each individual piece of music. So how do you honor all the creators that went into that music?
There's a lot of things you talked about there that I want to dive a little bit deeper into, kind of one at a time. But the first one, just for yourselves at EQ, how does EQ get paid? Is it a transaction fee and that's it? Is there royalties attached as well? Or how does that process work?
So anything that gets transacted on our platform, we take 3%. So 3% because I absolutely love the Detroit Tigers baseball, and you cannot tell me that they're the best baseball team ever, the 80s in particular. So I am a diehard Detroit Tigers baseball fan, and ended up being a softball player. So I said, 3 is a really good number. Like, it's kind of like, it's a holy number. It's a good number. It's used in baseball. This has got to be the number. So we take 3% of the initial transaction, 3% of the secondary transaction, and we take 3% to facilitate the royalty payments. And that's another place of technology that we're going into, is how the royalties are paid, which is another layer in the music industry that has been predatory to artists. So distribution platforms have taken an astronomical amount from the royalty piece, along with labels, along with everyone else. And so that's another area that we think the smart contract technology can actually solve. So that ultimately we just are a transaction platform. We don't hold the collateral. We don't hold the NFT. We don't hold the asset. We are completely non-exclusive because we're all for artist rights. And so any area that infringed upon their rights, even with me making them mint on CELO, I thought that was too far in their pocket. So I was like, now we need to go multi-chain because, and then ultimately the next step of that is to be able to port it onto any marketplace. Because although we're supportive of our marketplace, if we built the NFT should go live on Royal. Maybe it needs to live on Royal. And who are we to say that marketplace isn't good for them? And that's how you sort of become fully decentralized. It's like, we want to be the piping, but not the controller. And so, like, how do you at every step sort of check yourself with that?
I love that. Just that you truly have a focus to put the artist first and make sure they're in full control of everything they're doing and the choices they're making here. And something I wanted to touch on in that regard is CELO. You mentioned your philosophy. You built on CELO, but you do want to go multi-chain and support multi-chain. But getting back to CELO, because that was a choice you made in the beginning, why was CELO a good the right chain for EQ to build on in at least its early stages here?
Yeah, and it's still my first choice chain, and I'm still like a diehard believer. So CELO was built by 3 incredible founders that essentially built it intentionally to solve a climate crisis. Like, that was intentionally the focus of the chain, and also to really look at emerging marketplaces and financial inclusion. So it was built for the climate. It was built for financial inclusion. It wasn't built for gaming. It wasn't even built for NFTs. It was never built for that. It was very much focused on the true heart of that. In fact, at the center of it is something called the Climate Collective. So built into the chain automatically goes into the Climate Collective. And the Climate Collective makes investments in real life natural assets to protect the earth. It just, that's how it exists. It's how the chain functions. People are bolting on the chains like, oh, we're really caring about you. Look at what we're doing over here to do carbon offsets. But it was actually built into the core ethos. I read the white paper. And when you read the white paper, you know the heart of the chain's founders. Because at the end of the day, most of these chains are made by founders, right? They're, except for maybe Bitcoin. Some people says, well, he doesn't exist, but even Bitcoin has its people. So if you look at it that way, you have to look at the intention of the founders. And so CELO is truly a net negative chain just by existing. The ecosystem of founders are all deeply focused on solving climate crisis and financial inequality in the world. That's the heart of, when we were in Barcelona in April, the founders were there with everyone. The ecosystem was just so readily available. And there was a previous chain there the week before at the exact same venue. And the people that worked there came up to a lot of us, me included, and said, what different people. Like, everyone's so nice. Everyone's so caring. And so I think also, and I will give a shout out to Merrick, the CTO, who, again, came out of MIT Labs. Merrick is a really, really thoughtful technologist. And so I think some of even the technical infrastructures that are coming in the future are very competitive. But it's been this sort of quiet chain, it hasn't been where no offense, the crypto bros have been. But I believe in the long run, it's going to be the most sustainable chain because of how it was intentionally built from the beginning.
Ulf, do you realize our audience has been either watching or listening to this episode for 20 minutes?
20 minutes? No, they should probably subscribe.
Yeah, they should subscribe. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you comment and turn on notifications. And if you're listening to this podcast, especially if you're on Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating and a review.
We're also on Twitter. Instagram, and even TikTok. So go check out the episode description. You can find all that information below. And we have an update on the NFT, don't we?
That's right. We didn't previously mention this, but this NFT for OG supporter is a one of one. There will only be one of this kind ever minted, and we have a few surprises for the person who purchases it. The link is in the episode description.
And back to the episode.
So in terms of, to that point about CELO not being as well known, is that part of the reason as well to kind of go multi-chain in the future? Because I was on the EQ exchange kind of exploring that type of thing, and it was good from a education standpoint. I signed in with MetaMask and then realized that I've got to switch the network, everything along those lines. But do you feel that to stay on CELO, not only for the artists, you should empower them and have them be able to choose, but also for potential collectors that there's maybe too much friction there in the education process?
Yeah, I think that that's exactly it. Eventually, we hope to be a leader in educating that you should have more than one wallet and you should be playing on multiple chains. Like any good technologist, financial analyst will tell you, like, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Like, even when you go to do your retirement plan, right? And you pick, like, do I want high risk or low risk? Like, you sort of, everyone should be there. But that was really part of it too. And I think that some chains, and I think CELO though now is getting the message in that regard, because we've been such a vocal, as you can tell, founder in this case, is that, the reality is that Web2 still exists, whether people want to admit it or not. People still have Instagram accounts. They still want to go to TikTok. And so, like, Polygon, for example, has done a lot of really good things in connecting directly with Instagram so that you can start to see your NFTs on your social platforms. Now, I don't think that's always going to be the case, but certainly for right now and in the near future, people still are pretty steady on their social media platforms. So unless you have an integration into those, it's trickier. The other issue with CELO that we came upon, which again, they're solving with us right now, and we've had meetings literally with OpenSea. So OpenSea, if you're listening to this, yes, you need to add CELO to the secondary marketplaces, because the secondary sales, obviously in the NFT space, is where a lot of the money is made. So far, none. And I will say this, and people can argue with me, but the secondary spaces currently that exist do not work well for music, period. They're not built for music. It's like Craigslist. It's just, and no offense to OpenSea, but you're Craigslist. Like, everyone's trying to sell everything in their mother, including finding a roommate. So it's hard to do when you've got everything there. You don't like to sift through it. But also the technical pieces that are different from music related NFT assets require a different infrastructure that can support the contract. And I think the more and more that technology and that smart technology grows, music is going to need its own secondary space, period. We'd like to build it. That's what I've been saying to CELO, like, just build it like Magic Eden, right? Like, Magic Eden is allowing now different, not just Solana is showing up in Magic Eden. So, but again, even that platform is not necessarily great for music NFTs.
So that's what I was going to ask, is about secondary sales and if EQ supports that. And with everything you've just said, what is the plan for the future to support secondary sales?
Well, welcome to my life of my roadmap in existence. Because, oh my God. And the things we could build, right? And so, like, there are days like today where I was like, I should just build my own secondary space and just be done with it already. Like, just be the music NFT secondary space for all chains. And we're just the mother of all mothers. Like, let's just build that. Because even for us right now, it's wired into the initial sale, but we don't really have a place for the secondary sales. Now, we did on testnet, we tested on Polygon, our actual smart contract, and we did test to Polygon, and it did get ported into OpenSea because they support Matic and they support Polygon. But then we ran into all kinds of issues on the secondary sale because the type of contract that we built, again, Polygon doesn't necessarily support really well music NFTs. Like, there's a couple of things. It doesn't allow you to change the secondary rate. It caps at 10%. Well, that's not going to work for music. It doesn't really allow for the secondary sale to honor the original splits of the contract. So in the smart contract. So, you lose them. So then you have to create a separate contract just to read that then reads that, oh, that contract got sold. Oh, these are all the wallets that need to get paid. And then that's got to be so it's just a lot of steps. The other part that it doesn't handle well is a couple of things. A real life good to a secondary sale. There's no way to make sure that the real life good goes into the secondary sale of the NFT authentication. The other part of it is the royalty payments. So if royalty payments are going to switch to holders and it's built into the contract, it doesn't do that very well.
Right.
So all problematic.
Well, and I had a couple of questions around the NFTs themselves, and I'm glad you brought that up because that was my big question. So, you take Ashanti's, you get the deluxe or the diamond or whatever the highest one was, where you've got some of these huge opportunities like a red carpet walk or VIP tickets, anything like that. And I was going to ask how you go about tracking that. Like, does EQ do that itself at this point? And I've seen it with other projects as well, but a lot of times what they'll do is they'll almost issue a new NFT that just represents that one thing. And then all of a sudden from one NFT, you have like 10 NFTs for all the different things. But how do you approach that challenge?
It's right now it's manual. And it's really difficult. Even with some of the current startups that are there, again, I kind of go back to the infrastructure and management issues. Mm-hmm. Like we kind of all built the car and forgot the engine. It's like, but look at the car. It's so pretty. But it's like, oh, but it doesn't drive. We don't know what kind of gas it takes, and you can only stop at certain gas stations. Like, so it's kind of the issue with the whole system. So when I looked at this plethora of problems that are currently like able to solve, there's so many opportunities. Obviously, being a startup founder, all I see are opportunities. I could have 10 startups just based on all the problems we've encountered, because I'd be like, oh, that's a good startup. Someone should solve that. I'm not sure it's me, but someone should solve that, because there are all of these infrastructure pieces, like even for Ashanti, right? Like one of the things that we had to start to build was she wants to know who bought them. Well, a standard everyday artist can, you can go look through the wallet and you can say, okay, wallet address X bought this, but she actually wants to know them. So there's this like really like a basic CRM issue, right? And so initially we had built it where you just use your wallets to connect. Well, now we've gone back to a full registration process with an email. And it wasn't for us, it was for the artists that are like, well, how do I email them after? How do I surprise them? How do I say, hey, like, check this out? So like some of those basic infrastructures that we really don't like in Web2 are still necessary if people are going to run a business.
And then when it comes to earlier on in the conversation, you were talking about the NFT itself and how it's an automated process for artists. How do, like the cover art as one example,
Great question.
Do you have in-house people? Like, how is that created?
So glad you asked me that. Okay. So this has been like so fun to make. So we have our first partner, a company called Flan. And so Flan is a Web3 company that does basically freelance art. So they're like Fiverr for artists for Web3 art. So if you think, going back to the analogy of Shopify, if you think, okay, I need to make an e-commerce site. And if you were to go to Shopify, they'd say, well, which design do you want? Do you want this one for $1 or this one for $100? And it does all these other pretty designs. And then it's like, oh, you need to have SEO words. Like you basically go through the steps. If you think about an NFT, it's very much the same way. So when we're building this backend infrastructure, our first sort of pilot is like, oh, you need cover art. You can choose your own, or here's some partners. So now you can choose a partner. Now, this is the other key component of the type of technology we built, is now if an artist does the cover art, they too can be part of the sale of the NFT, because you can collateralize an NFT with other stakeholders. So now that artist gets to be acknowledged, hey, I did the cover art. Which it can be then spun off and be its own NFT, or it's coupled with the music. And so now you have both the artist and the musician benefiting from an NFT sale, because we wire that into the smart contract. So essentially they would say, well, as a cover artist, I get 10% of the NFT sales. And that's a deal. I waived my fees to do it. So now you have really great art, because now I'm 10% wired into the contract. So that essentially now when an artist is building an NFT, they can choose that, or they can upload their own. Right. So that's the back end piping of like bringing in these other pieces that they still need. The same for a producer. let's say that an artist wants to make a piece of music and they're like, God, I really want this producer. Well, again, if you have a flow of producers, it's like, here's the producers. If they match, they both come into the NFT. So now a producer that otherwise would have to work on spec and maybe one day be paid by Spotify, never going to happen. You now can be wired into the contract. So the thing that was most paramount for me, and this is the most boring part of the conversation, is smart contract technology reads metadata very well and it handles payments. That's ultimately what makes it awesome. It stores information, reads data, and splits payments. Like, what a beautiful thing. Because in the music industry, most people are fighting over payments. When do I get paid? How do I get paid? Will I ever get paid? And how much am I getting paid? And will I get paid? And that's the number one, because they've taken money and made it scarce. And so when you take money out of creativity and you make it scarce, people fight about it because they're pouring their heart into this. It's their intellectual property. It's the very divinity of who they are. And then you're going to take the money out of it and control it. Well, then you're just asking for a war, essentially. And so I said, well, what if you could neutralize money and payments just happened automatically by virtue of doing what you're doing? And now people just get paid. So it solves that problem.
I love it. And I wanted to touch on the artists. And so something you mentioned, and this ties back to, again, artists getting paid, is the secondary sales. And something that's going through my head is, okay, so an artist has their NFT. Great.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that NFT includes the utility function, like a backstage pass. How is that handled when it comes to secondary sales? Because if it's a secondary sale and it was my NFT and I go sell it, presumably I'm making up the price. I sell it for whatever I want. Even though the artist is making royalties on the secondary sales, if I only sold it for $10 for whatever reason, and it, whatever translated, to regular dollars here, and it, originally went for like what the artist valued it at was maybe 500. Well, do they have to honor the utility factor? Is it still a backstage pass for the new owner, or does it get complicated when that sort of situation occurs?
A yes to all. It is just such a major problem when you're talking about the utility piece and the royalty piece and the financial piece and how these holders get traded. And I think that this is the further depth of the smart contract. So building in expiry dates, building in expiry times for things will help solve part of it. So the backstage pass is already expired, but this is what remains. And having the smart contract automated in those ways to really walk through the whole use case of exactly that. I think we're still just so we were so excited that we figured out okay, split payments and handling the secondary payments and how do we have other people involved? And then we're like, oh crap, now we got this other part of the equation to figure out. It's completely a minefield, especially when you're talking about music. And I think that's why art NFTs exploded the way that they did, because in many cases they were easier. Even, it was regenerative art, right? You do one piece and all of a sudden an algorithm can make 500. That's a programmatically easier to handle. But now you're talking about all these other nuances and royalty payments. And some royalty payments are for a year and some are for 2 years and some are for 6 months. And then the percentages are different. One artist wants to give 10%, one wants to give 5%. So there's no uniformity in it, which is challenging. So I said to the team, I said, well, let's just handle the first transaction. And then let's think about how these secondary payments can be handled.
One of the things you talked about early in the conversation was the education piece to fans, knowing why they're collecting these, to artists, and then also the community side of it. Out of curiosity, how many artists are coming to this with, in your opinion, the wrong attitude? So why I ask this is, when we had the early days, 2021, with Nifty Gateway drops, we saw a lot of artists, a lot of big name artists come into the space, do their drop, sell out on Nifty, and then they haven't been in the Web3 space ever since, kind of thing. And could be argued they do some reputational damage when they do that as well. And so how do you implement that side of it? And also, how many of the artists are coming in initially with maybe that wrong idea, like percentage wise, of just like, oh, cool, how do I launch an NFT and get money out of this?
Yeah, I would say it's really all of the above. There's so many misunderstandings out there around, and in many cases, the sellouts were bought by Nifty themselves. So that's also like the dirty secret. So the dirty secret in a lot of these major platforms is they're not actually being sold by humans. They're being, the founders themselves are often buying them. And then they say they're sold out. So then people want to go there and sell the other ones. And then you have eventually someone holding the bag. So that's number one. There is a lot of that game being played across many platforms. We won't play it. But there are a lot that are playing that game where they are basically buying up their own NFTs with a what we would call a bot wallet, of which they put their own money in there and then it sells out. Now, the artists themselves, they don't care because it's sold out. They don't care who bought it in those regards. And then there are the genuine artists. Then there's this whole middle layer of genuine artists that want to utilize this technology because they really want to be able to create change and they want to own their intellectual property. And at the end of the day, if you want to own your intellectual property, you need to be in Web3, period. If you ultimately care about your own intellectual property, you'll need to be here. Because this allows you to monetize it in a way that is wealth creation and not paycheck to paycheck. And that is a real sort of fundamental difference, but that is a change in the psyche. That's a change in the psychology. You know, how many of us over the years have heard starving artist? Oh, they're a starving artist. You have the cousin, oh, and your grandmother says, oh, he's a starving artist. Like everyone and their mother has a family member that is like, oh, he's an artist, isn't he precious? But you know, that's sort of been the general psychology. Now with Web3 holds the first opportunity that I believe that artists can actually generate wealth from their intellectual property, which is a very different mindset. So we have to cross this chasm between I'm being paid, pay me right now. I'm starving. I need to be paid right now I actually want to look at my landscape and I genuinely want to be an artist for my life. These are the pieces of the puzzles we need in order to generate wealth. But the unfortunate part in the music industry as a whole, we all love the one-hit wonders. Let's get them big fast. Let's look at TikTok and find out who's the current artist. And let's just spit out a song and feed it to people into the algorithms. And so that's the mindset. Oftentimes, culturally, I do believe it's shifting. And I believe that it has to shift because that's not sustainable. It's just not sustainable. So you do have this really sort of mixed blend of artists. What I would really love is the biggest artists in the world to start to give a giant FU to a system that did make them wealthy. That's what I would love to see. Like everyone sort of disses on, you know, Kanye for all of his outbursts. I don't mind them some days. You know, some days I'm sort of like, go to town, you know, like at least someone's saying something, you know, like, you know, I think that there are some real artists out there that care. And then you have the artists that don't care. They really are just happy to play the game because they want to chase the bag and they want to be wealthy. And unfortunately, there's a lot of those. But there's what I love is this middle layer and the emerging layer. And that generation, this new generation that understands that they can make money off of their time and their intellectual property, we have to nurture that group and teach them wealth generating principles, not paycheck principles, which is what the industry has been. So that's like the shift in the entire mindset.
I'm curious on the fan side. So let's say you're a fan of a musician. Everybody loves music, and you got your favorite artist, and they're putting out music NFTs. Are music NFTs only for fans who are also collectors? You know, if I'm just a regular fan who likes the music and I appreciate the artist, is there any incentive or really, great reward for me to go buy a music NFT? And I'm not, let's not count in the experiences side, because I know that can be an additional benefit. I still have to really want that experience, right? Mm-hmm. So otherwise, is it only for collectors? Because I already get my music from Spotify and other streaming services, or what's the answer there?
Okay, so this is the biggest debate in the industry as a whole, regulation. So this is the biggest debate, because if we say that the music NFTs are financially good decisions for a younger generation to have a portfolio. We're essentially saying that they're securities. We're telling them to buy stock. And we can't tell them to buy stock because it's a violation of SEC to tell them to buy stock. But yet they're missing, even Canada is missing the entire boat, is that my girls, so I have a 15-year-old and an 18-year-old, eventually they're going to get a credit card. When you first get a credit card, they give it to you when you're in university and you're walking down the hallways and you want to go to the pub and they're like, here, take our $500 entry-level credit card, right? Who didn't get one? Everyone who goes to university, that's when you get your first credit card. They literally comb the hallways giving you credit cards. Now that's totally fine. They don't teach you anything about the credit or the minimum payments or the fact that a guy's going to come to your house and cut it up after you've gone to the pub so many times and you're well over the limit. There's no education, but that's allowed. So that's allowed. You're literally selling credit and you're selling a financial product in the hallways of colleges. Think about that, right? But yet we say, buy a music NFT that potentially has value that increases that you can utilize for your credit card, that increases in value, that starts to teach these wealth generating principles. That makes it a security and not allowed. So this is the issue I have, is forget what we've already thought about as a security. That system should exist, but we should make a new law of understanding of how these are financial instruments that can ultimately change the lives, particularly for women and people of color, because now instead of just getting that credit card, what if it actually was backed by an NFT asset that you own? What if you had bought Billie Eilish's, when my kids first told me about Ocean Eyes on YouTube, and I had to listen to it 500 times a day. If I said, hey, you should just go buy your NFT, because maybe if you buy your NFT, that song's going to be big. And if you bought the NFT, what if you held that on? And then all of a sudden my kids pay for college. They pay for their first house. There's different elements to this. But the unfortunate part of the industry is there's so much confusion and there's so much bullshit that I'm just like, can the grown-ups just have a conversation? Crypto is here to stay. There's these things that are part of it to stay. We need to find a balance, right? Between, can it be regulatory? Can we have some regulation? Not all regulation, because again, if we add all of the financial regulatory system, it eliminates women and people of color to be able to buy it, because that's where inherent bias and financial inequality exists. That exists in the regulation. It prevents people of color and women to purchase wealth generating assets because you have to have a pre-qualifier, right? You have to be worth so much and have so much value to buy the asset. Then they consider you can lose your money because you can remake it. But a woman and a person of color that doesn't hit that mark isn't allowed to purchase some of those assets because we're not investable. We can't invest. You're too much of a risk. So it's inherently biased.
Super interesting, Janice. And we're getting toward the end of our interview. And I mean, you've covered so much ground here. One thing I'm curious about, shifting gears a little bit, is the fact we're recording this early September. We are still amidst a bear market. We may be amidst a bear market for quite some time. But as a founder working in a bear market, what is your thoughts? I mean, you've been around the crypto space for a little bit of time now. Is now a good time maybe for... Let's preface this with somebody listening to or watching this episode who they're experiencing their first bear market. What would be your words of advice to them of why maybe they want to stick around through this tough time?
Well, first of all, everything in life is a roller coaster. It's a wave. This is no different. Crypto going through its cycles. It's gone here before. It's probably a really good thing because we have to shake up the market for what are real projects to what are not. I would say to my beloved Web3 founders and crypto lovers is we have to stop fighting amongst ourselves if we all want to float our boats. So that's like all boats float at the same time or we're all going to sink. When you're a new industry wanting to be taken seriously, this infighting between ETH and Bitcoin, it's just got to stop. You're going to have a bit of everything. Let's all just try to make a little bit more love here. So that's sort of the first thing. The second part of it, I think, is a bear market. There's so much fear in the marketplaces across the board, which they need to know that that's often by design. And so when there is a bear market, the top 1% get wealthier. And you could see that. You just need to look at how much Jeff Bezos stocks are going. Like, you just need to know, because people go back to surer bets, right? So people go back and they freeze up and they go to surer bets. Well, where do surer bets exist? They exist in tried and true companies. Those companies get wealthier. And then again, wealth isn't financially spread equally. So when you have so much fear, reject the fear. Like, that's my biggest thing. Reject the fear. Make your decisions, know you're going to be okay. If you're interested in this side of the world, it's just time. This is the time to learn. This is the time to sort of like take a time out between buying every token and say, okay, what do I need to understand about the fundamentals of Web3? And the fundamentals of Web3 are fundamentally about wealth generation in long term. Yes, you're going to have some one-hit wonders, but it's really about how do you balance it in your portfolio, and consider this an area of portfolio growth for you. Because when you're looking at things that are happening, it's easy to see that this market will come back. But first and foremost, all of us in Web3 have got to stop fighting with each other. They have got to stop, like, between Cardano fighting with this dude and like this dude, everyone's shilling on this one and literally shitting on the other one. Like, it's shilling and shitting everywhere we go. And I'm like, can we just stop for 5 seconds and just get it together? Let's just try that. So, because if we do that, we'll get out of the bear market faster. That's the kicker. That's the kicker. When you eliminate fear and you come together, the market will calm. But when there's fear and panic, it goes haywire.
That's definitely a refreshing take. We've talked a little bit with other guests about maximalism in the space and that type of thing. And yeah, I know for Ulf and I, we're definitely against that. We believe, I think, in an interoperable future. And so it's nice to hear you say that. Janice, we like to end every episode of Show Me the Crypto with the same 3 questions we ask every single guest. It's a segment we call You Had Me at Crypto. Ulf's going to ask you those questions.
Okay, nice.
All right. You ready, Janice?
I'm ready.
All right. First question here. Who is your favorite person to follow in the crypto space?
Oh my gosh, that's so tough. There's so many great ones. I'll tell you, I like to follow the women in the NFT space. They're my favorite. I like to follow any sort of diverse women-led project, because that's where you're going to find love and hope and inspiration.
Love it. Love it. What will the price of Bitcoin be 10 years from now?
10 years from now? So this is going to be controversial. It's going to be north of 100K, but I don't think it's going to be what people think it's going to be. But I do say, if it's at, what is it right now? 20 something thousand? 23?
Yeah, I think as of today, it dropped a little bit. So like 19 or 18 or something like that.
Yeah. So it's probably, again, if you kind of think about the rule of 10, times it by 10, probably going to be somewhere around the 100 to the 100. But it's not going to be a million.
I like that. We've had a lot of people who guess a million, although not recently. So
yeah,
the bear market's changed everyone's mindset.
The bear market is only 2.5 years long. By 2025, everything's going to be changed. Yeah. So 2025, we're all going to be coming out of this. And during that, you're going to see a different decade. I will say that for those that like to follow historical patterns, they should check out Kondratiev, which is a Russian economist that was murdered by Stalin for predicting the economics of life too quickly. And essentially, he said, well, we can't have other people know this knowledge because people will get wealthy. So Stalin had him murdered. True story. But if you actually look at it, it was built in 40-year cycles. So you sort of have these 10 years and 10 years and 10 years. And so the decade that we are in is called the spiritual crisis. We are in a decade of a spiritual crisis. So health, wellness, healing, those things are going to be very, very important. So those that are in crypto should be looking at those startups, because people will be looking at those. They will be looking at that environment. Hence why we have to get it together and come back to love, which is going to take us about 3 years before we're done fighting.
All right. Third question. What is the most underrated coin or project in all of crypto?
Other than
CELO.
EQ.
CELO.
CELO?
CELO is the most underrated.
Nice.
You know, it is the 150 million % the most underrated blockchain, organization, community across the board.
I love it. I love the conviction in that answer.
Yeah. A quick question before we wrap. I know CELO, I read that in July they had a brief 24-hour outage, which hadn't happened in like 2 years. Did that impact what you were doing at EQ at all? Did you feel that? No.
Not even a bit. No. And again, isn't that kind of, if you think about the technical infrastructure, which Merrick, the CTO, the thoughtfulness of C Labs, the group that is behind this, not one in 2 years. Does Solano have one every month? I don't know, like every other month, like
right,
every other day. I don't know. Not to shit on them, but if you look at sort of the technical infrastructure, to not have had one in 2 years is pretty historic.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. Janice, such an interesting conversation. There's a lot of things that you're tackling that are tough problems, but you're ambitiously taking them on. We wish you all the best. Thank you for joining Alf and I on this episode of Show Me the Crypto.
Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you for listening to Show Me the Crypto. Please make sure to subscribe as well as rate and review this podcast.